Hello, all you creepy crawlers out there. Welcome to another episode of Blowing Smoke Podcast with Kimiko Kusanagi. Today's topic is Skinwalkers. So, Adrienne Keene, founder of the website Native Appropriations, has written in response to non-Navajo people incorporating the legends of their writing and that into their writing. Her response is, "We as Native people are now opened up to a barrage of questions about these beliefs and traditions. But these are not things that need or should be discussed by outsiders at all. I'm sorry if that seems unfair, but this is how our cultures survive. So for all intents and purposes, I will refer to them as SW for the rest of this podcast. Many Native Americans dislike the fact that SW appear in modern media because of the superstition that mentioning them might cause them to hunt the person mentioning them down. So light up and listen in." Alright, so let's get to this really. So in Navajo culture, an SW is a human, a practitioner of witchery, or a witch, who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. The term is never used for healers. Upon initiation, a person is said to gain the power to become an SW. This is done via dance, song, ceremony. It's used to curse instead of heal. Although both men and women can become a witch, men are more commonly initiated because it is generally thought that only childless women can become witches. In some stories, people who have, attained the highest rank, which means pure evil, this can be achieved by killing a close blood relative, incest, necrophilia, and other culturally taboo acts and evil acts. Upon completing one or more of these acts, this is said to destroy their humanity and allow them to become fully initiated in the way of witchery. Although an SW is most frequently seen as a coyote, wolf, fox, eagle, owl, crow, the SW is said to have the power to basically assume the form of any animal that they choose. A decision based on what specific abilities are needed. SW are commonly believed to be the color white while in animal form. This is how many distinguish an SW in animal form from a regular animal. And some Navajo also believe that SW have the ability to steal the face of a person and can be spotted and singled out from other people because their eyes glow like an animal's, sometimes even more so even in human form. The animal form, in animal form, they can be spotted moving swiftly and unnaturally or acting strangely. SW are usually very hairy in their human form. Some Navajos describe them as a perfect version of the animal in question. Since SW are shunned and despised, numerous attempts have been made to hunt and kill an SW. They are not usually successful, however. Sometimes an SW will be tracked down, only to be led back to the house of the tracker or somebody known to him. The SW lore is very similar to Old Norse stories of the Berserkers, which were a group of warriors who wore the skins of animals, predominantly bear or wolves, into battle, and much like an SW, many stories told of these Berserkers turning into the animals whose skins that they wore. In European werewolf lore, a human form will keep any injuries sustained during animal form, which is sometimes a good way to find a SW in hiding in your village, city, hometown, whatever. It is said that if a Navajo knew the person behind the SW, they had to pronounce their full name, and in 3 days, after they pronounced their name, that person would either get sick or die for the wrong that they have committed. It is also believed that the only way to kill an SW in animal form was to shoot it in the neck with a bullet dipped in white ash. Some say SW have the powers to, read human thoughts. They also possess the ability to make any human or animal noise that they choose, regardless of their current form. And an SW may use the voice of a relative or the cry of an infant to lure victims out of the safety of their homes, since SW cannot enter an inhabited home without invitation, kind of similar to vampires. While community leaders and cultural workers are known as medicine men and medicine women, or by other positive terms in the community's indigenous language, witches are seen as evil, performing horrible and harmful ceremonies and manipulative magic in a perversion of the good works that medicine people traditionally perform. In order to practice these good works, traditional healers may learn about both good and evil magic in order to protect against evil. Some medicine men were said to be so in tune with the flow of nature that they would often take the form of a sacred totem animal. Now, a totem animal, they are kind and gentle animals that have grown on humans so much that they acquire a sacredness and are honored with dances, music, and artwork. These men are not to be confused with SW, however. Medicine men practice healing and blessing and the removal of curses, but people who choose to become witches are seen as corrupt, seeking to harm humans, lay curses, and practice evil whenever possible. So let's talk a little bit about what these SW can do. So SW use spells and charms to instill fear and control their victims. Some of the tools at their disposal include fragments of human bone launched by blowguns, which can poison and kill the unfortunate victim. The human bone dust, which it causes paralysis and heart failure, and the powder that they use is called corpse dust or corpse poison or corpse powder, to poison their victims. It is a compound of ground infant bones, often twin infants, and specifically bones from the fingertips and the back of the skull. The SW blow it into the faces of their victim or down the chimney of the victim's home. Soon after the victim breathes in this dust, their tongue starts to swell and blacken. They undergo convulsions and they die not long after. SW have also been known to find traces of their victim's hair and wrap it in a pot shard and place it into a tarantula hole. A SW can use anything of personal belonging and use it in ceremonial ritual against the person they are doing evil against. Even live rattlesnakes have been known to be used as charms by the SW. It's pretty scary. So the Navajo believe that if you ever lock eyes with an SW, they can absorb themselves into your body. Alternatively, some Navajo also believe that if you make eye contact with an SW, your body will freeze up with fear, and then the SW will use that fear to gain power and access and energy to you, or from you. SW, like many other malevolent legends, gain power from their victims' fear. It is said to say the SW, the word, out loud, will attract them to you as if you've been marked. And to say their name out loud is to invite them to yourself. So, I'm going to give you an example. An example of an SW. So there's a legend called the Deer Woman, sometimes known as the Deer Lady. It is a spirit in Native American mythology whose associations and qualities vary, depending on situation and relationships. So to women, children, and men who are respectful of women and children, she is associated with fertility and love. However, to those who have harmed women and children, she is vengeful and murderous, and known to lure these men to their deaths. She appears as either a beautiful young woman with deer feet or a deer. A really great example is go watch the show Reservation Dogs on Hulu. There is a deer lady in that show. Great show, by the way. So another example. This is an example. It's not really an example of a SW, but it's a what people usually believe is an SW, and it actually is not. It is a completely and totally different cryptid. So the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a mythological creature or evil spirit originating from the folklore of plains and Great Lake natives, as well as some of the First Nations. It is based in and around the East Coast forests of Canada, the Great Plains region of the United States, and it's grouped in modern ethnology and speakers of Algonquin family languages. The Wendigo is often said to be a malevolent spirit, sometimes depicted as a creature with human-like characteristics, which possesses human beings. The Wendigo is said to invoke feelings of insatiable greed and hunger, the desire to cannibalize other humans, and the propensity to commit murder in those that fall under its influence. Great example of a Wendigo is the show Hannibal. Main character actually sees Hannibal in his messed up states as a Wendigo. He's a man with deer-like antlers. Or Pet Sematary, because Pet Sematary, the book, not the movie, mentions the Wendigo. Okay? So in popular media, many shows like Supernatural, The X-Files, and Smallville have episodes about SW. In the book series Experiment in Terror by Karina Hall, the book Red Fox revolves around SW. In the movie SW Word, it's directed by James Isaac and revolves around a pack of SW trying to get the son of their leader back. In Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Wind Through the Keyhole contains a person named the Skin Man, a shapeshifter who terrorizes the town by transforming into various animals at night and embarking on a murderous rampage. In Monsters and Mysteries in America, the SW was a subject in the episode Desert Wasteland and was suspected for many livestock massacres. In the Mercy Thompson novels by Patricia Biggs, the main character is a coyote, SW. For instance, in video games, Mortal Kombat, the character Nightwolf has an alternative costume that resembles a skier, which wears a wolf pelt on his head. And in the film, like Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the Native American warrior Nightwolf also acts like a SW by transforming into a wolf. And once again, like the show Reservation Dogs, which features the Deer Woman. And there's also a game on Steam called SW Hunt. It's a horror-themed hunting game from the creator of Witch Hunt. Main focus of the game is exploration, non-linear gameplay, and atmosphere. Basically, you run around and you shoot SW, if you happen to even find them. So now from cryptidsfandom.com, they have a little bit of story time. So let's do some story time, right? So it says, we surveyed all of Reddit for the most horrific and terrifying encounters with SW. So the first one is called On the Res, Alone at Night. My uncle and cousin saw a large deer on the side of the road. When they got closer, it hopped over the fence like a bipedal man. One time driving back from Gallup, my dad saw an old Navajo woman walking on the side of the road, and when he slowed down to offer her a ride, she took off into the plains quickly with inhuman speed. Once when I was a kid, my family at my aunt's house, which is a rural, secluded area, when we were toyed, we toyed with a few entities. They would make animal noises, and when we looked to the directions of which the noises were coming from, they would turn a flashlight on and off. The noises would come in all directions, and increasingly shorter succession. Usually when I'm there on the reservation visiting, alone, late at night, I feel the presence of evil and dread. Panic and paranoia will wash over me, and as sudden as it comes, it will leave. Next one is, it moved like a toy rocking horse. My uncle is a Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them. and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is, the most badass person I know, and if it scared the crap out of him, it must be true. Alright, the next one is... Just forgive me for a moment. I gotta open a soda because my mouth is dry. It's one of those days, guys. Gotta love blood pressure medicine. It dries your mouth out. Excuse me. So, they ran on their back legs. So this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of the Indian reservation. And one winter, I was home for Christmas taking care of the farm while my parents were away, Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, way late in the night, and I hear all our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be some wild dogs that were rampant. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that were rampant in the area. So I throw on some boots, grab a shotgun, load it up, and head out into the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time I see two dogs. They were standing up facing each other and fighting. I think, perfect 2 for 1. So I pump a shell into the chamber of Mr. 12 Gauge, and then it happened. The two dogs heard the rack, they both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away, on their back legs. Immediately I froze, and every ghost story about SW and all the other native legends I grew up with flew into my mind. Now keep in mind, I'm a white guy. And up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories the native kids would like to tell us to scare us. That night, they became real to me. Alright, the next one. Human animal. In July of 2004, near Gallup, New Mexico, I had my first and only encounter with an SW. Before this, I used to say, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, I'm a believer now. What I saw was not full human nor full animal. I was moving and I had just completed cleaning and was with my 10-year-old son. We had called it a night and we're headed to the new place. As we walked out the front door, I saw a figure move from behind my neighbor's car to a nearby tree that stood between our apartments. It didn't have red glowing eyes, snarling teeth, or a rotten smell. It did move quickly, but not quickly enough to avoid the light from the nearby light post and the porch lights. It didn't look at me or come towards me. It moved as if it was trying to avoid being seen. I was within 15 feet of it, but I did not look back to fully inspect it. What I saw was a wolf-like animal that sort of resembled the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, just not cartoonish. It had brown fur and was completely covered in it. It wasn't a pelt, and it wasn't a very large wolf. It didn't have any human traits except for that it walked on its hind legs. It cowered behind the tree as we got into our vehicle. When we got in, I asked my son, "Did you see that?" Thankfully, he hadn't. My brother-in-law says that it wasn't an SW because I would have never seen it. To this day, I can picture what it looked like. I know they exist, and I probably never encounter one again. Next one is The Grove. This didn't happen to me, but a very close friend of mine. I've heard a lot of stories about coyotes and SW, and had a weird experience or two with coyotes. Creepiest was walking up to my sleeping bag, being surrounded by paw prints without ever hearing them during the night. Waking up to my sleeping bag, being surrounded by paw prints and never ever hearing them during the night. But never anything paranormal, so to speak. Patrick's story, however, kept me from going back to my favorite backcountry secret stash. He was leaving the area one morning, had been camping there a couple days, and said that there was a coyote. It always seemed to be close by, like in his peripheral vision, but never overt. He loaded up his truck and started to drive down the wash out to the fire road. And at the end of the wash, he could see the coyote following him. When he pulled onto the road, it was running next to him. Now he was freaked out, so he sped up. He said he was going like 35 or so, and it was running along beside him. Definitely not possible. When he looked back, the coyote was running on 2 legs and was wearing what Patrick said looked like buckskin pants. An instant later, it was a person wearing a coyote fur keeping pace with the truck. He looked again, it was gone. We never went back to that grove after that. Alright, next one. It walked up and down the ramp all night. I was staying at my grandpa's trailer in Arizona for a couple of days with my mom and my dad and 2 brothers. I forget why we went out there, but it had to be important because my dad never tagged along with us out there. Anyways, come nighttime and everyone is asleep except me, I'm watching Nickelodeon on TV in the living room, and I hear footsteps walking up the front porch. Since my grandpa was up there in years, he had a long wooden ramp next to his door. I was expecting something to come to the door and knock, but nothing happened except it kept walking up and down the ramp. My grandpa lived about 25 minutes away from the nearest town, and the only neighbors around are other family members. I remember being really scared at this point and couldn't think straight. My brothers were asleep in the living room on the couches near me, and I couldn't force myself to wake them up. Instead, I calmly walked to the back bedroom where my mom and dad were asleep. I lay down on the floor and tried to sleep. Meanwhile, whatever is walking around outside is still doing its thing. After a couple of minutes, I hear my mom attempt to wake my dad up to see if he can hear it. This relieves me because I thought she was asleep the whole time. I tell her I hear it too, and we lay there and listen. My dad is not the best at being coherent after sleep, and he falls back asleep right away. It stops after a couple minutes. The next night, the same thing happens, except it's coming up to the back door. I freak out again, and this time just go to the back bedroom and lay down and go to sleep. So that's all I remember. I also forgot to mention a weird thing my grandpa said that made sense later. Before turning into sleep, he said something like, "Don't pay attention to anything you hear at night. You're safe inside." I should also mention that the next day, I remember seeing boot prints and paw prints in the sand by the ramp. Alright, so next one is, these were not my friends. Excuse me. This all happened about 5 years ago. One night, a few of my friends decided after a night of hanging out that we'd go on an adventure at about like 3 a.m. Bad idea, guys. That's the witching hour. You don't do that. We took a ride about 50 miles to this old Spanish ruin called, I'm going to butcher the name of this. I'm so sorry. It looks like it says Quarry in New Mexico, and was once the seat of the Inquisition. I can't for the life of me remember what the place was actually called, so we jumped the front gate to the place and started exploring. One of my friends brought a flute with him, and he started playing it, and about 30 seconds into his mediocre playing, something started screaming really, really loud at the top of whatever's lungs, at the top of the long-destroyed walls of the place. It was going from wall to wall really quick, screaming the most blood-curdling scream you've ever imagined. We got the fuck out of there. One of my friends pissed his pants. Of course, you just had to mention that, didn't you? And drove for a few hours to Bandelier National Monument, where we planned to camp out for the rest of the weekend. We got to Bandelier and probably about at like 6 or 7 a.m. to set up our camp. After a few hours of just talking about what the hell happened at the ruins, I went to take a piss probably about like 300 feet away from our camp. This is where everything starts getting a little fuzzy. I remember seeing 2 dust devils coming my way, and then when I turned around again, 2 of my friends that were there, they were motioning me to follow them. I couldn't help but follow them, like I was being pulled behind them in shackles. I followed them for what seemed like 10, 15 minutes, and then I snapped out of it. These weren't my friends. They had bright red hair, and my friend's face had my friend's faces, but cat eyes. Both of these friends were brunette. I stopped walking, and they looked at me with the most terrifying gaze I've ever seen. Monsters in movies are nothing compared to this. I turned around and ran fast as I could all the way back where I came. And after like 5 minutes of full sprint, I finally got back to the rock that I pissed at and found our camp. Everyone was there, still sitting there talking, and didn't even notice that I had even been gone. I told them what happened and with the lookalike SW, and we packed everything up and probably left within like 10 minutes and got the hell back to Albuquerque. Alright, let's see. This is the last story from Reddit. It's called, Was Grandma an SW? I believe one of my aunties has encountered a SW. I live in New Mexico, a state with 19 Pueblo SWs are feared here, and they ought to be. The story my auntie told me is as follows. She was coming to visit my family at our house for dinner. We live in the hills of the Sandia Mountains, so the road is narrow, winding, and treacherous. She was driving when she rounded a bend, and there, in the middle of the road, was a large white owl. This owl looked at her with such strange white eyes, perhaps a reflection of the car lights. My auntie slammed on her brakes, and after the owl had, stared her down, it flew away. When I mentioned the story years later, she said that she thinks that it was the spirit of her mother visiting her. Why else would the bird land so foolishly and bravely in the road? I believe it was an SW, roaming the hills that it once called home. So why is that story called Was Grandma an SW? Oh, okay. Now on to my story time. So, Kimiko here. It was late fall of 2019, and I was asleep in my bed, which is right next to the window. At around 2 a.m., I heard a scream right outside my window. I jumped up, freaked out. I looked out the window and saw nothing, literally. I waited a few minutes, just, staring out the window. And I heard the scream again, and it was like literally right in front of me, but there's nothing there. So I closed the blinds and lay back down, not wanting to think about whether or not that was a banshee or an SW or some type of malevolent spirit hanging out by my window. Either way, was not good. And I wasn't the only one that heard it. Other people here in the house, my kids and stuff, they heard it. They just didn't get up to care or cared enough to it didn't bother them. But it did bother the hell out of me. But alright, so thought of the day. Not every witch is an SW, but every SW is a witch. Well, that does it for me. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, okay? Stay creepy, like Kimiko Kusanagi. Bye!